Buying an investment property in a big city as opposed to a small town. Obviously, you're going to have real estate professionals that are going to debate on both sides. I've heard arguments for both cases, and there's no right or wrong answer. They're both good options. The first and foremost I would tell you is to invest in one of them. We'll talk about the pros of a big city. Obviously, there's more room for appreciation, easier to get to and to manage with your trades. So, there are things, the higher rents, so you're obviously getting more rents in the bigger cities, and the banks are sometimes more receptive to properties in big cities as opposed to the small ones. The cons of the big city, obviously, cash flow sometimes can be an issue if you're buying a triplex for $1 million. Sometimes, the rents will just pay for the expenses. So we just got to watch that. Cash flow can sometimes be an issue in the big city. Obviously, it's a bigger price item, so you're going to run into that. Usually for a seasoned investor at the big cities, there are some good deals, but a lot of time, it's that age-old saying, you need money to make money. The pros of a small town. Obviously, with the price being lower, it's easier to get into that market, which is advantageous for the new investor. There's better cash flow. So the rents are a little bit lower, but, they're not terrible. So, if your mortgage is only so much, usually I would only invest in a small town if I thought I was getting good cash flow from it. Room for appreciation, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But, you want to invest in a place, in a small market that you think there is going to be appreciation. Cons of a small town. Historically, there's been a less appreciation, obviously, in the small towns. They remain pretty consistent. Lower rents, obviously, the job market is lesser, so you're going to get lower rents. And, if you don't live in the city that you're in, you're obviously going to need a property manager to take care of that. That's usually 8 to 10%. So personally, I like the idea of investing in a small market for these reasons. Market entry. I think, market entry to get into the market. So too many times people don't have the money to invest in a rental property in a big city. So I think if you're sitting on the fence to get into that market, the small market, I think it's a good way to get your feet wet and to start generating some income and get into the business of investing in real estate. Great cash flow. Like I mentioned before, I don't think I would buy in a small town if I wasn't getting great cash flow from the property itself. So that's one thing. The other thing is too, I would look for a town that I think, it's on the upswing. I would talk to the local government, see, what the job market is like, what the population growth is like, and see if there's any big companies that are going to be establishing their warehouses there. You want to look at the education sector, see perhaps if there is a college moving in, or if people have, the ability to take courses there. Transportation in the major cities. I think that's also a big thing. If you're within an hour from the big city, do they have, a train system that goes in, subway system, or buses? That's also big. As I talked about at a previous video about buying RESPs for your kids, I think by buying into a small market, it's a good way of paying for your children's education. So it's a good way to do that because it's not as much as buying that triplex for $1 million in the city. So ideally, it would be nice to have a combination of the two. So have that property that appreciates well in the city. We own 2 properties ourselves in a big city, just purchased one in a small town. So ideally, it'd be nice to have both. Again, there's no right or wrong answers. I'm sure there's a lot of people that sort of attest to just buying in the major cities. And I've heard those arguments and they're great. I can't argue with that. But I've also heard from the smaller town investors. I met with one person that owned 50 doors. And they couldn't believe that somebody would invest in the big cities when they could be making the type of cash flow in the small towns. So again, you're going to get different opinions. Both of them aren't wrong. There's advantages to both of them. That as long as my advice would be to get started and do what you think is necessary for your investment journey. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll talk on the next one.